right, hey everybody. Today I'm here with Lucas, and Lucas was the fellow that came out from the Alabama University. Was it? It's not the forestry department. It's what's your department there?
In geography and natural resources.
Geography and natural resources. Yeah. And he did an ecological study of the impact of animal logging, specifically mules, on my job here in Winchester Springs, Tennessee. Some of you that's been around a little while remembers the students coming out and hanging out with me. They spent a few weekends. What was it, two or three?
Yeah, 2 weekends. Yep.
So I'm going to kind of let him tell you a little bit about his findings, what he's come up with. We don't have cordless microphones, y'all, so we're going to have to kind of get by, and the wind's blowing a little bit. So I'm going to try to do the best I can to where we can get him to work. He's not as loud as I am, so. And he did it to me again. He brought me some new people that I didn't know. I told him last time he came that every time he comes, he brings somebody new, and I'm terrible with names. And some of you already know that. We've been working on the skid steer, so I got Red sitting here with a cable hooked to it, but he's here today, and he's going to give us these results of what he's found. And I'm probably going to step over wherever you guys are at so I can kind of watch the camera for it.
All right. Well, there's sort of three components to the study that I was doing. So what I was looking at was the ecological impacts of draft animal logging, and primarily I was looking at soil disturbance, soil compaction, and residual tree damage. So sort of the area of the soil that's disturbed from the logging, and then how much the soil is compacted by the mules or by the machinery. And then as far as the trees that are left standing on the site, whether those had scrapes or wounds on them from where a log would scrape up against them. So I went up 1 weekend after Zach had marked the timber and mapped where all the trees were on the site. And then I went up 2 more weekends while he was working, and I was able to watch him work and fell trees and skid them with the mules and the skid steer. And so I was able to see exactly where things happened, exactly which trees he was cutting, how many logs they were bucked into, and how he was taking the logs out of the woods. And then I was able to measure the roots that the logs took and the area that was disturbed. So as far as soil disturbance went, I measured how long the path was that each log traveled from where it fell to where he was decking the logs at the landing, and then measured the width of the skid trail every couple of feet. So I was able to calculate approximately the area of the soil that was disturbed for each log. And then I also looked at the skid steer impacts, where the skid steer was taken into the woods, and how that disturbed the soil. For the soil compaction, I took soil cores, so I sort of dug out a little tube of soil, about maybe that big, like that deep or so, and I dried it and weighed it. And since I knew the volume of it and I knew how much it weighed, I was able to calculate the density of it. And so I looked at the density I took a couple cores in the mule skid trails, in the undisturbed forest, and in the skid steer path, and then also in the woods road that was running through the middle of that tract. So I had 4 different areas that I'd taken samples from and was able to compare the density across those 4 areas. And then for the residual tree damage, I went out and walked the path that each log traveled and looked at the trees that were left standing and saw if there were any places where the bark was scraped off them or anything. And I would mark that down, mark what tree it was on, and measure the area. So I have results now, finally, after a couple months. As far as soil disturbance, only about 6% of the area that I looked at was disturbed from the operation, from the skid steer and from the mule skidding.
Now, when you say 6% of the area,
Yep.
Is that 6% of the tract or 6% of just what you've measured off?
Just of what I looked at.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And most of that disturbance was really not severe at all. There was no rutting. I had a couple different classes of disturbance, and there was nothing in the most severe class. Most of the disturbance was really just that the leaf litter was scraped away. but the soil was pretty much undisturbed. And that was about half of that was from the skid steer, and about half of that was from the mules. As far as compaction goes, there was not a significant difference between the density of the soil in the undisturbed forest and in the mule skid trails. So as far as looking at it statistically, there's no real difference between the undisturbed soil and the soil in the mule skid trails. The skid steer and the road also had no statistically significant difference in the density of the soils. So that's another thing, that the mules did not really compact the soil as much as the skid steer did, a little bit more. And then as far as residual tree damage, I only found 5 trees that had wounds from skidding on them across the areas that I was looking at, and that was about 1.5% of the trees on the site. And the wounds that I found, the average size was about 4 square inches. So pretty small wounds, and they were down close to the ground where a log would have been scraped up against the tree. So on the whole, not very significant disturbance at all. A small area, only about 6% of the site had any sort of soil disturbance at all. The mule skidding did not compact the soil any more than it was just in the undisturbed forest, and only a handful of trees, less than 2% of the trees on the site had any sort of wounds from the skidding.
Now, y'all, I really appreciate Lucas coming out and giving us these results. I was as interested in it as you guys were. I've had several of you ask me, what's the student's synopsis of the situation, and I was excited to hear about it too. We always talk about it. Those of us that kind of knows and has been around this stuff a while, we know that mules and horses, oxen, animal logging, I should say, doesn't disturb the forest as much as equipment does. And we were just sitting here talking before we got on camera. I'm not one of these guys that are going to run a machine operator down. I'm not. I've been on that end. I came up, cable skidding, grapple skidding. I've done that already. So I know that it is possible for a machine operator, a heavy equipment crew, if they're very conscious about what they're doing, they can do a good job and leave very little residual damage. In fact, we were talking about bumping trees, like coming around a curve with tree link timber and whatnot. And I learned this from a skidder operator years ago. If you're going to bump into a tree coming around a curve with tree link timber, and some of the stuff I've done with the mules has been 28 foot because we would cut 2 sticks of 14-foot pulpwood. Well, when you got a long drag back there and you cut a corner, it's going to run to the inside of that turn, and if there's a sapling there in that curve, you're going to skin it. But you can take an old holler log or a piece of a treetop or something, throw down there in front of it, and you can use it as a bump stop to keep from dragging that log up against it, if that makes any sense. So there's things that machine crews can do to minimize residual damage as well as me. Even though I'm using mules, we still have some damage.
Right.
It's not zero. And some guys will say, oh, you log with mules and horses, there's zero damage. Well, that's not so. And you can tear up a place, y'all, with a chainsaw, cutting the timber just as quick or worse than you can with a machine. In other words, if you were to cut timber and didn't know what you were doing, you could tear a place up worse than a man that really knows how to cut timber and run equipment efficiently. You'll do more damage than he will. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
So as loggers, y'all, we're trying our best, or I know I am, and I've got friends that are machine operators. We're trying our best to minimize that residual damage, because after all, at the end of the day, it's the landowner's property. We want it to look good. We want them to be happy with what's coming out of it, not only monetary wise, but also when we're done and we leave, we want it to look good, to where they're proud of it, And every job we do, I'm putting my name on it, and when I leave it, I want it to look good. As I've been showing y'all here, like with us cleaning this fence row off and stacking tops and whatnot, it's important what you leave behind. Not only for the landowner, but also for the ecosystem. The animals and stuff that's going to be, like in here, I noticed the other day I walked in the timber just looking around, and in my skid trails where I've already been just recently, it's loaded with deer tracks. You know, when these deer are coming in here and laying up in these tops, you know, it's giving them cover. You know, and if they got water close by, it just makes a haven for them. You know, so it's not all bad. Some people say, well, if you cut your timber, you know, you're going to have tops everywhere and this and that. Well, yeah, that's true. You're going to have some tops, especially if you don't have a good pulpwood market. You're going to have tops. But with that being said, you'll create wildlife havens. I guess that'd be the word for it. And do as least amount of damage as you can. That's the idea, I think. Is there anything else you can think of that you might want to tell them, talk to them about?
I think that's about all. If you don't have any other questions.
Y'all, I appreciate you hanging out with us and watching and learning what Lucas. I really appreciate you all coming out and doing the study for us and putting it to paper. You know, doing the measurements, putting in the work, the effort, the legwork of showing us the ecological impacts of what we do as animal loggers. And I would encourage any logger, animal logger, machine operator, whatever, you know, when these students need you for their help to do these studies, hey, do it. You know, put yourself out there and let them do what they need to do, and let's educate the general public on this thing, because then that creates more timber for us to cut, more jobs for us as loggers. You know, be more conscious about what we're doing, and if nothing else, it'll teach us individually. I mean, I've learned a lot just by this, you know, percentage wise of what he's measuring, you know, how much I always knew that in my mind, I always thought that mules didn't leave much of a footprint as far as compaction. A lot of the old timers would always tell us that, you know, that a mule or a horse won't pack the ground like a skidder will. You know, and like this skid steer being a track machine versus a wheel machine, you know, it's not going to pack the ground like a wheel machine will. It would be interesting to have some good, consistent data, maybe like 2 jobs with animals compared to like a conventional skidder crew,
Right.
and just see what the percentages are, how they differ. You know, a man that knows how to run machinery and do a good job, you know, the work would be halfway comparable. That would be cool to see. You know, what the actual difference is. You know, some people say it's better, but is it really? You know, is it really that much better? You know, I mean, obviously, if you ain't got to get in there and waller around with a machine, you're not going to tear the ground up and pack the ground. But how would it work out residual damage wise? You know, that would be something that would be cool to see on paper. We have it here for us, so if we had it for a machine operator to compare it to, that'd be cool. So maybe at some point, if you get that opportunity, that'd be nice.
Yeah, I'd like to see that done for sure.
Yeah, so some of you machine guys that are watching this, do you care to tell them your phone number or a way to get up with you? Do you got an email?
Yeah, I've got an email I can.
Okay, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put his email up here on the screen. And if anybody is interested in chatting with him and getting with him and maybe letting him do a study on your job, I'm sure he would be glad to talk to you about that. And, you know, surely, hey, look, the more we can educate ourselves and our landowners and the general public, we're doing a service for this industry, y'all. That's what it's about. Anyway, look, thank y'all for watching, hanging out with us. I appreciate it. Lucas, I know appreciates it. I appreciate him for coming out. As always, I'm going to put my email up here on the screen as well. If you need me, holler at me. Be glad to talk to you. And don't ever forget, y'all, I'm going to be praying for you, each and every one of you. Now, I'm serious about that. I don't take that lightly. I'm not telling you just to make you feel good. I mean it. I pray every day for every one of you that are watching my channel. I appreciate you. Y'all take care. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.